Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Midlife Crisis, the show where I talk about every single DC crossover event in chronological order. We are halfway through DC 1 million, which we started 2 weeks ago. If you haven't listened to the other two episodes, go watch them now, because you'll be missing a lot of stuff. This is probably not a good point to be jumping in. So the first time that we're going to be starting off with today is Wonder Woman 1 million. But before we get into that, if you're watching this on YouTube, please like and subscribe and hit the notification bell. So, let's just get straight into this. Wonder Woman 1 million is written by Christopher Priest with art by Michael Collins. Oh, wait, no, it's both of them. So Christopher Priest writes it alongside Michael Collins. With art by John Stokes and... Michael Collins is doing the art, yeah. Yeah, Michael Collins is doing the art as well as writing it. Christopher Priest wrote a couple of issues of Wonder Woman during the 90s as like a fill-in artist. A fill-in writer, I mean. He's probably the most famous now for his Deathstroke run that he did a few years ago during like the New 52. So, Wonder Woman is currently in the 853rd century on Venus? Is it Venus that she's on? She's on one of the planets. Yeah, she's on Venus. And Venus has been completely taken over by the Amazons. The problem with the Amazons being immortal is that when you're doing futuristic storylines, it's really hard to do I'm not saying it's impossible to do interesting stuff with the Amazons in the future, but it's really hard to because they're immortal, and there's no real reason why they would change what they do all that much. So the future that we find of Wonder Woman and the Amazons in this is pretty much the same, except instead of it being the island of Themyscira, it's the planet of Themyscira, because Venus is completely controlled by the Amazons and no men are allowed to step on it. A couple of other differences are that the Amazons now use better weapons. Wonder Woman refers to them as like more technological weapons, but they aren't. At least they don't look like they are. They just look like regular weapons. And they also use giant golems, which are said to be robots, but when Wonder Woman fights one, which is during her challenge, she gets attacked by a giant golem while she's fighting Artemis, one of her fellow Amazons, like fellow Amazonians. She breaks the golem apart, and it's nothing but rocks. And so it's like, is it really a robot, or are they just referring to it as a robot to make it sound more futuristic? But yeah, I said Artemis because this is the same Artemis that Wonder Woman knows in the present, because all of the Amazons are... they're all immortal, so like Hippolyta exists, and you would think that Diana exists too, but we don't actually know Diana's whereabouts. What we do find out in this is a little bit, not much, but a little bit about the future Wonder Woman. We barely know anything about them, but we do learn that in the future, Wonder Woman isn't actually a person. They are a marble statue of a woman that has been brought to life, which is a really cool idea because it is the opposite of Wonder Woman's birth, which is that she started off like she was made of clay and then brought to life as a human being or a mortal being. But it's kind of the opposite of that, where like the marble is like the Wonder Woman of the future is living, but they are made out of marble still. They don't have human skin or anything. But that's as much as we know about the future Wonder Woman. There's probably theories that it was Diana. Maybe it's a big reveal that it is Diana. My theory is that Diana died and they made this new Wonder Woman as kind of like a as a way to represent her in memory. A couple of other things that we learn about the future is that they now have these big healing rooms that just heal everyone instantly. And that's when Diana realizes that as time has gone on, the Amazons have become less like mortals and have become more like the gods that they revere and worship, which she kind of has a problem with. She doesn't like the fact that her people are becoming more like gods. She feels like it's wrong. So Wonder Woman gets to test out the healing room alongside Artemis. And Artemis at this point points out that Wonder Woman's DNA has come in a little bit differently than they were expecting, but they're just like, oh, maybe it's just because you're from a different time, and that's all it is. So off-panel, Artemis goes and fights something, and she almost dies. And so Hippolyta, the same one that we know, comes in and is like, Artemis is about to die, and so are a bunch of these other people that were with her. So we got to take them all to the healing room so that they can heal, because we got to save their lives. And they turn on the healing machine, and the healing ray comes down, except it malfunctions and just roasts them all alive. And so Artemis and all of the warriors that are in the healing room are all killed. And Hippolyta's just like, oh my god, this is awful. And Diana's like, we gotta get out of here. Like, we're in risk of dying. And then one of the guards comes over and is like, you know, the TV, what's it called? Like HeadNet. The HeadNet broadcast came over and told everyone, because HeadNet is the thing that connects all the planets together and communicates to all the beings that live in the future. HeadNet came on and was like, warning, the Justice League from the present are actually traitors. We have proof of this because it happened with, like, Superman and Batman and Green Lantern and stuff. Like, they all caused chaos on their planets. So it's reason to believe that Wonder Woman is also a traitor and that she's the one responsible for causing the healing machine to malfunction. And the cool thing about this is that Hippolyta does not turn against her own daughter. I think she does in a previous issue, which sucks. I feel like there was one I read where she did turn against Wonder Woman, but in this, she stays in character. She doesn't turn against her own daughter because she knows who her daughter is. And she tells Diana to get out and find who is responsible or what is responsible for malfunction, causing the healing chamber to malfunction. So Diana heads off, and as she tries to run away, she gets slashed by a sword, which actually really hurts her. And that's how she discovers that she's lost her powers somehow. So, and we'll find out how later. She jumps out a window, attempting to fly, and smacks straight into the ground, which she says, like, Zeus is probably laughing at me right now. And that's when she bumps into Majala the Mystic, who, from what I understand, is a witch. Who I'm guessing is allies with Wonder Woman. I haven't read a lot of Wonder Woman, so I don't know a lot of these characters super well. But from what I gather, she's an ally of Wonder Woman, and she knows a lot about magic and whatever's going on. So she shows up and is like, Diana, I can show you the truth of what happened. Basically, this is a room that I oversee that lets me see everything that is going on Venus. And one thing I do know is that we've been getting in peculiar amounts of data that have been messing with the healing ray. And the corrupt data was activated by your entrance. So as soon as you entered our time, the corrupted healing ray was activated, and then it killed everyone. And the way it killed everyone was because it absorbed all of your powers in order to power itself, so that it could shoot the death ray. So Wonder Woman comes to the conclusion, she's like, I have to die, because maybe if I get hit by the death ray, it'll bring everyone back to life, because it will give me back my powers, and comic book logic. Opposites, reactions. So Diana runs into battle and dies on purpose. She gets overwhelmed and dies. And Hippolyta is, no, Diana, like my Diana, we gotta take her to the healing chamber right now. And they take her to the healing chamber, and they hit her with the healing ray, and it causes the entire healing chamber temple to explode. And out from the rubble walks Diana, and and Artemis and all of the Amazons that had died in the healing chamber have all been resurrected to life. So Diana's plan worked, But the downside to this is that there is no healing chamber anymore, which means if they die, that's it. They can't be resurrected, they can't be healed or anything. And so Diana, having helped her people save Artemis's life and all of the other Amazons, decides that she needs to head off and find her fellow JLA members so they can figure out what's going on and who is defaming their names. And that's the end of the Wonder Woman tie-in. I think Wonder Woman 1 million was really good. I think it's up there as, like, it might be better than the other JLA 1 millions. Yeah, I think this one might be better. I don't know. I just like Wonder Woman. I just like Wonder Woman stories. It's always fun because it's Greek mythology and stuff. So it's always fun to read. And, yeah, I don't know. It was a cool idea of Wonder Woman using her death to her own advantage. But yeah, so that's the end of that tie-in. And the next one that we're going to be talking about is Detective Comics 1 million, which I think is our final Batman tie-in. I think so, because we've done Batman, we've done Shadow of the Bat, we've done Nightwing. I think this is the last one. It's written by Chuck Dixon, with art by Greg Land and Drew Garassi. Greg Land, I think, is the one who is he the artist that's infamous for tracing? That might be him. This is during the 90s, so maybe this is back when he wasn't tracing. So yeah, the story of this, of Detective Comics 1 million is called The Bug That Ate Tomorrow. So, Detective Comics issue 1 million is surprisingly important to the overall event, but only one small part of it is important. Like, I could probably get, like, if I was only talking about the important stuff in this issue, I could literally finish this in 10 seconds and just say what happens at the very end of the issue, because that's the only part of it that it's really important to the overall event. But I'm not going to do that because that's not the point of this podcast. The point of this podcast is to talk about each issue. But even then, there's not a lot to talk about in this one because it's just a regular issue of Detective Comics. The problem with this issue is that it is a tie-in to two events at the same time. Because at this point in time, No Man's Land had just started. There was a huge earthquake in Gotham City that destroyed everything, and so, or caused like a ton of destruction, and Gotham City went into quarantine and became shut off from the rest of the world, and that's No Man's Land, you know, and, which would become the status quo for Batman for the next couple of years. And so that's just happened. But then we have the Batman from the future showing up. So we got these two events happening at the same time. And so you got future Batman just kind of stuffed into No Man's Land. Where he's like, hey, I'm here. Oh, wow. This terrible earthquake just happened. Oh, boy. And they're just like, what are we going to do, future Batman? And he's like, well, I'm going to have an avatar of mine, because I can just create avatars whenever I want. I'm going to have an avatar stay here and try and figure out the cure for the virus. While, you know, Nightwing, Tim Drake, and me, we're going to go out, we're going to go stop Firefly, because Firefly is attacking one of the downtown districts. And what Firefly is doing is he's convincing or, like, controlling people who have the virus. I don't know how, but I guess their minds are messed up by the virus enough that they're just listening to what Firefly wants. And he's basically making them destroy their own houses, burn their own houses down. So they gotta go and deal with that. So half of this issue is Avatar Batman working on the virus and Alfred just being like, is there anything I can do? And Avatar future Batman is like, nah, I'm fine. I don't need your help. I can do everything myself. And Alfred's just like, oh, ho come. I wish I had something to do. So that's all Alfred does in this issue. And meanwhile, the rest of the issue is Nightwing, Robin, and Batman all fighting Firefly. So they go and find Firefly, and I have to mention, they go in, they don't name it, but it's like a monster truck. It's a bat monster truck. Batman has a monster truck. And it's driven by Nightwing. So yeah, they're just driving the battle in this big-ass bat monster truck. And they fight Firefly. And future Batman, because he's supposed to be the star of the issue, is the one who actually fights Firefly. Nightwing and Robin just fight the people causing chaos. And future Batman rips off Firefly's wings because he's as strong as Superman, I guess. Like, Firefly has metal wings. And future Batman rips them off with his own bare hands. Like, he's got a suit on, but it's basically just his bare hands, because the suit is just like a very thin layer of rubber latex or something. So he rips off Firefly's wings, and then Firefly just falls to the ground, and Batman's just like, I'm not a man, I'm an ideal, I am justice. And then Nightwing and Tim Drake are just like, like, all these people are so crazy. Look at that guy. He's on fire. And there's, like, literally people on fire, like, screaming, running, and, like, being all crazy and stuff. And then all of a sudden, the Bat Monster truck catches on fire and then blows up. And this snaps everyone out of their, like, weird, crazy trance. And they're all like, what are we doing? Like, why are we blowing up our houses and stuff? And Tim's just like, everyone's seems to be okay. And Nightwing is like, for now, right now they've ran out of things to blow up. But because of the way the virus is working on their brains, soon they'll find something else to blow up. So we gotta find that cure. That's the only way we're gonna truly stop this. And Batman shows up with Firefly under his arm and is like, we don't need to go back and talk to the Avatar because I can communicate with him whenever I want. And he has told me that he couldn't find, or like, he could find the cure, but it's not as simple as we were hoping it was going to be. And then that's when Avatar, Batman, like future Batman at the very end, is like, the only way we are going to cure everyone is by recreating Solaris. Only he holds the key to his own annihilation. And that's the end of the tie-in. That's where it ends. And overall, I think this one is just kind of nothing. Outside of the end, which is actually important, because it gives us the key to not only stopping Solaris, but also the virus. The rest of it is just a Detective Comics issue where they fight Firefly. And I'm assuming that was always going to be the plot of this, and Chuck Dixon just decided to use the virus as a way to explain how Firefly was going to control all those people. Like, he was probably going to do that anyway in the issue, even if this wasn't a tie-in, but the virus allowed Chuck Dixon to just have an excuse to do that. Yeah, other than that, if you're not a Batman fan, this one isn't really worth, like, reading all the way through, because unless you like Nightwing and Tim Drake and Alfred and stuff, you might as well just read the last page. In fact, this is probably one of the No Man's Land issues that you can just skip entirely, because even though it takes place during No Man's Land, it has no real bearing on No Man's Land, unless Firefly's role in this ends up being more important during that event than I realized, but I'm guessing it isn't, because he gets defeated. But enough about Detective Comics, because now we are on to our next tie-in, which is Man of Steel 1 Million, which is our second Superman tie-in, where we are going to be following the Superman of the 853rd century, who, at the moment, we know nothing about. As much as we know about him is that in the future, there is a lot of Superman, and he is one of them. So yeah, let's find out what happens in this tie-in, written by Carl Kessel, with dialogue by Jerry Ordway, and art by Anthony Williams and Dennis Jank. So, Man of Steel issue 1 million. At the beginning of this, we basically just get a little rundown for the people at the Daily Planet as to what's going on in DC 1 million over in Montevideo. And, you know, Vandal Savage comes on the screen and is like, this is my evil plan. I'm sending he doesn't say they're Rocket Reds, but I'm sending nuclear weapons across the planet to destroy things. And the only way you're going to stop it is if you make me the ruler of everything. And then the virus starts affecting everyone at the Daily Planet. Jimmy, Lois, what's her name? Simone, who is the chief of the Daily Planet at the moment. And, but then the virus very quickly goes away. So it's like, it's in them, but it's gone down. So, like, it hasn't emerged again yet, but it will. We've learnt that in the past, that the virus takes over the host, and then every now and then it crops up and the host goes crazy, and then it goes back down, and then it comes back up until you eventually die. So, the Metal Men show up. Was not expecting that, but the Metal Men show up with Dr. Magnus, who is now a Metal Man as well, going by the name Viridium. They show up and they're like, the Justice Legion were behind this, including Future Superman. Like, they're all evil. They're responsible for this. You saw it on the TV. You know, their robot from the future let this virus out. It's all their fault. And we can confirm that because Dr. Magnus, our master, got gravely injured trying to stop them. So we are offering our help to go and find this future Superman and stop him from hurting anyone else. So, future Superman's goal is to find the nuclear weapon that is being shot at Metropolis and stop it from blowing up. But he doesn't know that there's somebody inside the Rocket Red suit. He also doesn't know that it's a Rocket Red suit yet either. And as he's, wandering through Metropolis, he just straight up gets hit by a car. And it turns out this car is actually Iron, one of the members of the Metal Men. And so the Metal Men all come out and they all start fighting Future Superman. And Future Superman manages to fight back. And that's when Platinum shows up. And it's like, your agenda includes violently mutilating my Metal Men? He's like, no, I'm just trying to help people. Your compatriots attacked me. And she's like, yeah, because you're evil and we're here to stop you. And back at the Daily Planet, Jimmy notices that Dr. Magnus is twitching. And it turns out that all of the Metal Men are fusing together to become a being known as Alloy. And so Alloy fights Future Superman, and Future Superman just punches him a whole bunch and reaches into his metal gooey body and pulls out all of the Metal Men's cores that power them. And then Dr. Magnus shows up because everyone's like, oh my god, he killed the Metal Men. And Dr. Magnus shows up and is like, no, he didn't. He pulled out their cores, or should I say their corrupted cores. Because what happened is, the virus got out, and the Metal Men and I were some of the first to be corrupted. But because I had more human in me, I guess, I didn't get corrupted as quickly as they did. And so, they got corrupted, and then they beat the crap out of me, and then decided to pretend that it was the Justice Legion that beat the crap out of me. And that Future Superman has saved everyone by stopping them, and I'm going to try and find a way to fix the Metal Men. And as we know in the future, that doesn't work, because Platinum would end up being the only Metal Man to survive, the only member of the Metal Men to survive in the future. But Will heads off with all of his Metal Men to help them, but he gives Future Superman a flying saucer to use because Future Superman is losing his powers slowly, because the further away he is from his own sun, which is in the future, the more he loses his powers. so he can't fly. So he has to use Will Magnus's flying saucer to get around. So he jumps onto it and he heads off to find the Rocket Red and stop it from hitting Metropolis, which Vandal Savage orders the Rocket Red suit to try and blast Future Superman, and he's like, that should slow him down a little bit. And then he realizes that the Rocket Red has been sent off course a little bit, and he's like, how is that even possible? And it turns out that Future Superman has jumped on the back of the Rocket Red and is riding it like a bull. Riding it like like one of those bucking bulls. And that's where the tie-in ends. It ends right there, and it leads directly into the next tie-in that we're going to be reading. Superman issue 1,000,000, which starts off literally right after the previous issue. This one is written by Dan Abnett and Andy Lanning, famous for Guardians of the Galaxy, with art by Norm Brayfogle and Scott Koblish. So let's find out what happens to Future Superman as he rides on this Rocket Red, which isn't the most ridiculous thing that we've seen in 1,000,000, but it's pretty damn funny. So in Superman 1,000,000, we begin with the Future Superman riding on the back of the Rocket Red from the last issue. He already knows that there's somebody inside it, even though the only people that really know that are John Fox and Impulse, but I'll let it slide because Future Superman obviously has X-ray vision, and I would assume that's just one of the powers that he hasn't lost yet, so he just used that to look inside the Rocket Red and see that there was somebody in it. But he uses his... So the funny thing about Future Superman is that in a previous issue it was mentioned that the Supermen in the future have way more powers than the present Superman, and what that means is that this Superman can just have any power for any situation, really, because that's what happens in this, is that, like, there's a bunch of situations he ends up in, and he just happens to have a power for everything. First example of this is that he has this thing called Force Vision that allows him to create force fields by shooting red beams out of his eyes. Kind of like heat vision, but it's force instead. Basically, it's just Cyclops' force blasts. That's basically what it is. So he uses it to... He uses his pure strength to pull Arsenal, who is the person that is in the... Like, Roy Harper is the one that's in the Rocket Red. So he uses his strength to pull Roy Harper out, and then uses his force vision to contain the blast of the Rocket Red and cause it to explode. And then he uses his force vision again to allow him and Roy to land on the ground kind of safely. They hit the ground really hard, but the force field stops them from getting hurt. And then a bunch of people come along, and because they think that the Justice Legion are responsible for the virus, they try to attack Future Superman. He tries to use his subliminal level hypno-vibration powers, and it doesn't work because those powers have now disappeared. But he's helped, like, Roy Harper saves Future Superman by creating some flare arrows that blind all the people so that he and Roy can, like, they run away, basically. It scares them away. And then Lois shows up, and Future Superman is like, oh, Lois Lane, like, it's amazing I was able to finally meet you. I'd love to go and talk to you in your apartment. But before we do that, I'll take Roy to his house. So I'll take him to safety, and then I'll meet you in your apartment, and we can talk about what's going on. So Future Superman takes Roy to safety, wherever Roy lives, and then goes back to Lois Lane and Clark's apartment that they live in. Meanwhile, Lex Luthor is watching them on a television screen, and it doesn't really have anything to do with the story, but he asks the computer to show him a baby that's suffering from the virus, and he says the name Lena, who, in the comics, Lena Luthor is normally Lex Luthor's sister, I'm pretty sure. So either she's like his really young sister in this, and she's still a baby, or he like cloned her again and she's still a baby, or she's his daughter? I don't know. It's not important. Future Superman and Lois talk to one another. Lois is obviously suffering from the virus, so she wants to help try and find a cure. And Future Superman is like, well, if I go to Lexcom, if I have access to Lexcom and their technology, I might be able to find a cure. So they head to Lexcom, and which is what LexCorp is called at this point in time. And Future Superman goes onto the computer, and he sees that the entire world has been infected, and so they gotta work fast. And that's when Lex Luthor shows up and is like, what are you doing here? And Future Superman's like, Lex Luthor, it's lovely to meet you. I want your help in order to try and do this cure. What I need to go to the Fortress of Solitude because it's probably going to have the technology I need to make to get the components that I need to make the mini, the solar powered, the sentient sun that we have to make. Because they need to make Solaris in order to cure the virus, which evidently will create the evil Solaris in the future. Lex Luthor decides to help them because he has the virus, and also that little baby has the virus as well, but he didn't tell them that. So he wants to save them. And he also wants to look inside the Fortress of Solitude as well, because he's Lex Luthor. And Future Superman is like, don't worry, Lois, I'll mind wipe them so they won't even remember what they saw anyway. So they go to the Arctic, where they find the Fortress of Solitude, and Future Superman tries to get in, and he can't get in because not only is he not Superman in this era, but also his Kryptonian DNA is so far removed because he's from the far future, so he just can't get in. And so Lex's men try to blast their way through, and that doesn't work because the automatic defense systems start shooting back at them. So they all retreat, and Future Superman uses his powers to wipe their minds, and they get back to Lexcom, and Lex Luthor is like, you can use my lab, since it's the only chance you have, and Future Superman's like, that's great, I'll probably find suitable technology in here anyway. It's a good thing that we had your lab accessible. Thank you, Lex Luthor. And of course, Lex Luthor turns against them. He tries to shut them inside with some blast shutters, and he wants to, he orders these two guys in big metal suits to essentially pull Future Superman apart because he believes that Future Superman has the cure to the virus in his system because he's from the future, and that's Lex Luthor is just assuming that. So Future Superman fights these guys in the robot suits, and he rips their suits apart. And in order to stop some of the other ones, he has an electromagnetic pulse that he can use because, again, this Superman just has any power he wants. So he uses an electromagnetic pulse to shut down all of the robot suits, or at least most of them, and then fights the last one. And then more show up. He fights the last one, and then more keep coming. And he's like, I can't keep doing this. We gotta find a way to get out. I can't open the door. You're gonna have to try and find the code for the door. I might be able to use my powers to connect to the minds of the people in these suits, because they probably know the codes to the door. So if I sync my mind with theirs, because I have that power, I'll be able to figure out the code. So Future Superman does that, and he figures out the code, and he gives it to Lois Lane, and they manage to get out and fly away. And Lex Luthor's really pissed off about it. He's like, he got away. And then they head to a rooftop where Lois Lane is like, what are you going to do now? And Future Superman is like, I guess I'm going to have to go and find the rest of the Justice League. We're going to go to the moon where the Justice League's base is. Or he's meeting up with the rest of the Justice Legion, not the Justice League. The rest of his teammates from the future. So they're going to go to the moon where the Justice League's base is, and rendezvous. They have all the components they need, or he has a component they need, and he's hoping that the other Justice Legion members have gotten the rest of the components so that they can build the core that they're going to need to create a sentient sun. And they also need human blood. And Lois Lane offers her blood, and future Superman is like, that's great, because, you know, prophecy says that you are the one that does give us the blood that we need. But what he doesn't tell Lois Lane is that something drastic happens in the future. Like, her giving her blood does good for the future, but also there's something bad that comes out of it, and we don't know what that is. We just know that something bad will happen to Lois Lane because of this. And that's the end of the tie-in. Overall, I think this one was pretty good. I would put it up there as like one of the better Superman tie-ins. Not only is it one of the only ones that actually features Lex Luthor, which I like, but also it has future Superman and Lois Lane meeting for the first time and beginning to connect with each other, because when she first meets him, she doesn't even call him Superman. She refuses to call him Superman because she doesn't see him as Superman. He's just some guy from the future who says he's Superman. But then at the end of the issue, after they've spent all this time together, she calls him Superman, and he's like, oh my god, you just called me Superman. That means the world to me because you're a legend. Everyone knows who Lois Lane is in the future. So the fact that you called me Superman is the greatest thing ever. So I thought that was really wholesome. It's left me a lot of questions about what's going to happen in the future of this event, because there's a bunch of questions that have that this issue has left open, some plot threads that are going to be tied up, one of which will be tied up in the next issue that we're covering, JLA 1 million, where we're finally going to see the Justice Legion members all reunite and try to build the core that they've been working on building for the last bunch of tie-ins. So, this one's written by Grant Morrison, who is obviously the writer of this event and the writer of JLA, and with art by Howard Porter and John Bell, who both do JLA as well. So, you know, I imagine this one's probably going to be one of the most important tie-ins to the event, because it's the one written by the person who's doing the event. So JLA 1 million, first thing I want to note that I find kind of funny, because it's cool and nobody else went with it. Grant Morrison, while writing this issue, wrote it as if they were writing a comic book that was sentient and talking to the reader. But when you start it, it's like, hello, reader, like, I am JLA issue 1 million, and I'm here to guide you through this issue. And throughout the issue, it introduces you to every character with, like, a little summary and stuff. None of the other writers did that. And I'm curious if Grant Morrison asked them to, and they just chose not to, or Grant Morrison just didn't have time to tell everyone, or forgot. But yeah, their JLA issue is very different to all the other tie-ins in that way, which I find funny, especially because and kind of disappointing, because it's a cool way of writing it, of like, it's a futuristic comic book. This is supposed to be a comic book from the future, so it makes sense that it would be able to speak to the reader and be kind of like a narrator. So in this issue, the Justice Legion A are trying to get into the JLA Watchtower because they need it in order to build Solaris, because they need to build Solaris in order to stop to stop the virus. And then, you know, they know Solaris is going to turn evil, but they'll deal with that after. You know, right now, priority, stop the virus, deal with Solaris after. So, future Superman jumps into space to get to the JLA headquarters, and the JLA members that are currently left over in the headquarters, which are Zoriel, Plastic Man, Big Barda, Steel, and Huntress, sense that something is coming towards the JLA headquarters. They know it's the Justice Legion. They know it's Superman, and that Superman is going to get the rest of the members into the headquarters via the teleporters. And they still believe that the Justice Legion are responsible for the virus and are evil, So they're going to try and stop them. So it's Justice League versus Justice Legion. That's what most of this issue is it's a cool fight between the future Justice League and the present Justice League. So the Justice Legion make their way into the headquarters. It's disappointing that, like, the future version of Wonder Woman and Aquaman haven't really gotten to do anything. Like, John Fox got a lot of Flash issues to appear in, so he was established as pretty well established as a character, and futuristic Batman future Batman has been in, like, a bunch of tie-ins, and same with Superman, but the only issues that future Wonder Woman and Aquaman have been in are in this tie-in and the main DC 1 million issues. So out of all of the Justice Legion members, they've gotten the least amount of character development, especially Aquaman. We know nothing about future Aquaman other than that he's the king of the future Atlantis. So they break their way into the Justice League headquarters where future Wonder Woman fights Big Barda. Zoriel manages to make his way to where future Batman is. Future Batman is currently residing over Batman's body, because as we know, he took Batman's consciousness out of his body, like his spirit form out of his body, and sent his spirit into the future. So he's trying to keep Batman's body healthy for when his spirit comes back and goes back into his own body again. So when Zuriel shows up, future Aquaman shows up to deal with Zoriel, to stop future Batman from doing what he needs to do to Batman's body, which sounds really wrong. John Fox gets trapped inside Plastic Man's body, and Huntress is in there with him and shoots him with, like, a little dart that slows down his metabolism so that he can't run super fast. So Plastic Man is able to just beat the crap out of him and knock him out. Zoriel manages to make his way, manages to get out of future Aquaman's big water bubble that he's made around him. And future Aquaman is like, I can use my powers to heat up his blood to knock him out. And future Batman's like, no need. He'll trust us if I show him my face, because Batmans are known for keeping their identities a secret. They only show their identities to people they trust, so he presumes that Zoriel will trust him if he shows him his face. So we get to see future Batman's face for the first time, and he just looks like a guy with a shaved head. He's just a guy. You think of Rick Grayson from Rebirth, when Dick Grayson got shot in the head and then he, shaved his head and became Rick Grayson. That's what future Batman looks like. He looks like Rick Grayson, which would be that would be a fun idea if it was retcon that future Batman was Rick Grayson, if he never reverted back to being Dick and he just found a way to live forever and he became Batman or whatever. I don't know. There's a way you can figure it out. That would be fun. That'd be a fun idea. Nobody's doing anything with future Batman, so kind of do whatever you want. Steel contemplates on turning off the teleporter because he knows that future Superman is coming into the headquarters. And if he shuts off the teleporter while he does that, he will kill future Superman. But he decides that he wants to believe the best in future Superman, because he's like, you've got an S on your chest somewhere, which means you must be good. Because people with S's on their chests are normally good. Even though Cyborg Superman isn't a good person. The Eradicator wasn't a good person. And they both had S's on their chests. But whatever. Steel's logic turns out to be true. And the Justice League and Justice Legion stop fighting. And they put their and they figure out that they need to work together. So they start building Solaris, and then Starman shows up. He's like, hey, sorry I was late. Family business. And he's got the kryptonite under his arm. And then as soon as he shows up, Batman immediately, future Batman immediately just goes, Starman, I accuse you of betraying the Legion, the system, and the Commonwealth of Humanity. So why don't you tell us exactly what the Night Fragment is? And that's literally where it ends. It ends so abruptly. It's just Starman enters and Batman's like, "You're the traitor!" And then that's it. And that's the end of the tie-in. It almost feels like, because right after this we got DC 1 Million issue 3, and it's almost like this was going to be a part of issue 3, but it would have been too long, so Grant Morrison had to make it the JLA tie-in instead, because issue 3 continues on immediately from this scene. Or maybe there was supposed to be more in this tie-in, and it wouldn't fit in the tie-in, so Grant Morrison had to put it in issue 3. I don't know. Point is, the next tie-in we're going to be talking about is DC 1 Million issue 3. Well, it's not even a tie-in. We're going to be talking about DC 1 Million issue 3, written by Grant Morrison with art by Val Samix and Prentice Rollins. So yeah, let's get straight into this and see what happens next in the main event. It's been a while since we've read a DC 1 Million issue. Okay, so DC 1 Million issue 3. One thing that's going on in this issue is that Oracle is looking at all of the catastrophes that are going across planet Earth. Chaos is happening, and they got to figure out how to get rid of this virus. Otherwise, the people are going to destroy themselves because the virus is causing them to go crazy. We are reminded that the Atom is currently inside Oracle, which is something I had forgotten. And he actually figures out that the virus is messing with her brain. And so he manages to quell the virus in her brain so that she can think straight. So that's one thing that's happening in this issue that's kind of happening in the background. And so after he does this, Oracle is able to communicate with Nightwing because they're like, we figured out what the virus is, we can create a cure. And Nightwing is like, yeah, we got to figure out how to make an antidote and then figure out how to get it out to everyone. But that doesn't really matter because curing the virus was never a thing that was going to happen because the virus never planned on staying in anyone's bodies. Because in this issue, it is revealed that the virus is not only sentient, but it is the thing that made Solaris evil. So when the Justice Legion finishes building Solaris, the virus will leave everyone and enter Solaris, making it evil. Then Solaris will transport itself to the future, where it will end up in the future, where it will then live to take over everything. That is the plan that Solaris has. Unfortunately, the Justice Legion have to fall right into that plan because Solaris is the only way to cure the virus from everyone. So they create Solaris, and while they're creating Solaris, future Batman is beating the crap out of future Starman, Ferris Knight. I can call him that now, because that's his name. He's like, why are you betraying everyone, you piece of crap? And Ferris Knight is like, you're gonna kill me because the virus is making you go crazy. Like, doesn't Batman not kill? And future Batman is like, I'd rather not kill you, but you're right, the virus is making me kill you. However, instead of killing you, I'm going to give you a chance to redeem yourself. Because your cosmic raw is the only thing that's powerful enough to stop Solaris from destroying the present. Because we're counting on you being the one who sends Solaris to the future, and then we can deal with that afterward. But our plan right now is to save the present. And in order to do that, we gotta send Solaris to the future. And you're the only one capable of doing that. So, Ferris Knight decides to help. He decides that he is going to do it because he reveals that when he went and visited Ted Knight, first of all, he still doesn't say whether or not he killed Ted Knight. But it's assumed that he didn't, because he said that Ted Knight's eyes are what opened his eyes and made him decide that he doesn't want to be a villain, and that he does want to try and help everyone. So Ferrous Knight decides that he is going to try and stop Solaris from destroying the present and send him to the future. Meanwhile, Martian Manhunter deals with Vandal Savage, because Vandal Savage just has these big-ass tanks that he's using to cause destruction and mayhem. So Martian Manhunter shows up with Arsenal and Supergirl, who just shows up. We never found out what happened to Supergirl. I guess she was in a Rocket Red suit, and we just never saw her in one. But she shows up, and then Tempest is revealed to be alive, even though Vandal Savage stated that he had died in the last issue. It turns out that he just got sent into the South Pacific. We didn't get to see it. It was off panel, but he mentions that he was in the South Pacific, and he came back, and here he is. I don't know. It's a weird kind of writing decision for Grant to make, where he's just like, oh, Tempest is alive. I'm just gonna kind of like, just sweep away me saying that he died. I'm just not even gonna bother explaining why he isn't dead and why Vandal Savage believed he was dead. Maybe Vandal Savage was just lying to Arsenal to get on his nerves. But Martian Manhunter just plows straight into Vandal Savage's big ass tank, knocking it over, and Vandal Savage becomes trapped in the tank. And he actually hurts his eye, because I think in the future Vandal Savage has like an eye patch or like a missing eye, so this is where he like damages his eye. And then Arsenal shoots an arrow which keeps Vandal stuck to the tank because the arrow goes through his hand, sticking him to the tank. But then Vandal just reveals that he has an incendiary arrow. I don't know how he got it. He just has one. He's just like, hey, look, I got an incendiary arrow. And Arsenal's like, down! And like, Vandal Savage douses the incendiary arrow in gas from the tank, and the tank explodes, and Vandal is able to get away. Because he somehow survives the explosion. He's like, I may have lost today, but in thousands of years, I can wait. I have forever, because I'm immortal. They finish building Solaris, and Solaris goes out into the middle of space, and they're like, alright, now we just gotta hope that Starman is true to his word and does help us. Because if he doesn't, we're screwed. So the virus starts getting drawn out of everybody and into Solaris, and it takes control of Solaris, and Solaris turns evil, and then he starts doing like a massive solar wave in his attempt to destroy everything. And Starman shows up and is doing a big monologue about how Ted Knight's eyes showed him opened his eyes, and that he doesn't want to be a villain anymore. He just wants to be a good guy, and he doesn't even know if Solaris really was controlling him in the future, or if he made himself believe that he was being controlled in the future. Either way, he is content with the idea that he is making his own decisions now, and the decision that he is making is to try and stop Solaris and be a hero. So he uses the Cosmic Rod against Solaris, pushes back Solaris's solar energy, and Solaris retreats by sucking itself into his own black hole, and Solaris is then teleported to the future through a black hole. Starman dies. He is left floating in space. There's no way of him getting back to Earth. He's gonna die anyway, so his suit self-destructs, and it's called the Suit Mercy Destruct, because, Starman's either gonna die... the suit doesn't want Starman to die slowly, so it blows up, and it's very meaningful, because you kind of see, the suit start to explode, and then then we got a shot of, Ted Knight's house with his telescope, and in the distance you can see, a big star shining, and that's obviously Ferrous Knight exploding. Pretty great moment. Pretty good moment. One of the reasons to read this is the art is fantastic. So they did it. They stopped Solaris from destroying the present, but now the problem is that Solaris is in the future. Now the Justice League are in the future, and the Justice League that are in the present currently believe in their members enough that they will be able to stop Solaris in the future, but the Justice Legion are 100% certain that the Justice League are not strong enough to stop Solaris. So what they want to do is they want to find a way to get back to the future so they can help the Justice League stop Solaris, because they don't think they can do it on their own. And it ends with Huntress saying, I have an idea how to save the future. And that's where it ends. It ends right there. We end on the cliffhanger of, what is Huntress's plan going to be? Will they be able to get back to the future to stop Solaris? Or is there going to be a way for them to help the Justice League while they're in the present? We're going to have to find out in the next issue of DC 1 Million. But that's not what we're reading next, because we got more tie-ins. That's right, the next tie-in that we're going to be reading is Martian Manhunter 1 million. Remember how at the end of the Green Lantern tie-in, Green Lantern landed on Mars and he was caught by something, which it was alluded to that was Martian Manhunter that caught him? Well, we're going to get the continuation of that story in this. It's written by John Ostrander, who I have had a pretty mixed experience with tie-ins in the past. As you know, I have nothing against John Ostrander's writing when it comes to his main series, but his history of tie-ins has been pretty bad. Like, he has proven that he is not great at writing tie-ins, and it's because he's not great at committing. I think the last time I did a John Ostrander tie-in, I said it was good. I said it was a good... It was a change, and that he was starting to actually play ball and write good tie-ins to events. And I'm hoping that he did it with this one too, because he's forced to set this in the future. So he's kind of being forced to do something with the event. So, and also this one will be important because it features Kyle Rayner, so we get to see what happens to him. So, yeah, let's find out what happens in Martian Manhunter 1 million and see if this is going to be John Ostrander's next good tie-in. So, Martian Manhunter 1 million. Is it a good John Ostrander tie-in? Yes. Yeah, I think so. It's certainly not bad, but it's also it's pretty straightforward. It's basically just an origin story of Martian Manhunter, specifically in the 853rd century. We find out how Martian Manhunter gets to where he is currently in the 853rd century. So it starts off with Kyle Rayner landing on Mars and being caught by Martian Manhunter. We get to see it from his point of view, where he sees a comet falling through space, and then he realizes that it's Kyle. But it's been so long that he doesn't remember Kyle entirely, but he recognizes him, and soon he remembers that it is Kyle, and he remembers everything that had happened in the past. And because Kyle's costume is all messed up, Martian Manhunter fixes it for him, but he remembers Kyle wearing a different costume because he remembers Kyle from later than we do. So he gives Kyle a new costume, and it's fine. It's not as good as his other costume, the iconic one. Sadly, I think that costume is going to be gone for a long time, and Kyle's going to go through a bunch of pretty mediocre costumes that just feel like rehashes of Green Lantern instead of something unique. So after that, Martian Manhunter decides to tell Kyle Rayner how he got to this point, because it seems like Martian Manhunter is Mars itself. How did he become Mars? Well, many years ago, Martian Manhunter decided to leave planet Earth because time kept going on, and, you know, all of his friends were growing of old age and dying and stuff. And Martian Manhunter decided that he wanted to go out and explore other planets and keep other planets safe and try and find a place for him to belong. So he heads off, and as he's traveling through space, he takes on the forms of all sorts of different alien species and lives as them most of the time, very rarely ever coming out as his true form. And eventually, while in the planetary system, he comes across the planetary species, and they are attacking the planets that Martian Manhunter is residing over. So he fights against their forces, and he defeats them, and then he finds out that the reason why the planetary have been attacking is because their planet was attacked by this species called the Swarm, and they were running away from the Swarm and trying to find a safe place to call home. And so John Johns decides that he's going to go and fight the Swarm and try to protect the planets from them and stop them once and for all. So he spends many years fighting the Swarm. Like, many years. Just fighting them constantly. Alongside a futuristic version of the Justice League that isn't the Justice Legion. It's a different one that came before them. We don't really learn anything about them. We get a couple of glimpses of, like, there's a Batman. Spectre exists, which makes sense because you'd think that Spectre would just exist forever. And Wonder Woman has, like, Cyclops' visor in this future. But the Swarm is too powerful, and they lose. So Martian Manhunter loses that planet that he was living on, and he journeys to Mars, where he decides to reflect on everything, and he kind of becomes a bit of a deity to everyone that's on Mars, and tells them of his stories of the heroes that he's been with and his battles against the Swarm. And then Darkseid shows up and decides to ruin everything because he wants Mars to become the new Apocalypse. So he shows up on Mars and just he takes over and creates Apocalypse Mars. And so Martian Manhunter creates like a group of rebels to fight against Darkseid, and they have a massive war against each other that ends in Darkseid and Martian Manhunter being consumed by the Source itself. They travel through a boom tube to the Source. Remember the Source? And while they're in the Source, a being within the Source, which is assumed to be the Source itself, basically says to Darkseid, quell your anger, join the Source, it's all over, this is where you belong. And so Darkseid just gives into the Source and goes to New God Heaven. And then the Source is like, and what do you want, Martian Manhunter? And Manhunter is just like, I want Mars to be peaceful again. That's all I want. I just want peace on Mars. And so what the Source does is it uses its power to combine Martian Manhunter and Mars together, because it deems that if Martian Manhunter is Mars, then he will be fully responsible for keeping it peaceful. And that's what happens. And he is happy, and it is peaceful. He becomes Mars, and then humans start populating Mars, and then because they're consuming plants that have Martian Manhunter's DNA in them, they slowly start they gain like Martian features, so they're like half human, half Martian. And then number of years later, Kyle Rayner lands on Mars, and we're back to where we started. So Manhunter tells Kyle that he's going to need to go to Jupiter to find the rest of the Justice League. But he wants Kyle to also send a message back to his younger self. He doesn't say what the message is to us. I mean, he kind of does, but we don't know exactly what he wanted Kyle to say. He says it's in Kyle's head, so he already knows what to say. And he basically confirms to the reader that all he wants Martian Manhunter to know, like all he wants his younger self to know, is that eventually there will be peace. And then Martian Manhunter is like, all right, I got to set up the next tie-in. I need to communicate with Resurrection Man, who is alive in the 851st century. I need to wake him up. And so he wakes up Resurrection Man He's like, can it be? John, is that you, old friend? And Martian Manhunter's like, my apologies, across this space it is hard to gauge intensity, Mitch Shelley, but yes, it is time we triumph, or we lose everything. It now depends on you. And that's it. The end of the tie-in. I will say, up until the very end, it's pretty good. I liked the history of seeing Martian Manhunter become one with Mars. And then the end is just like, oh yeah, we gotta set up the Resurrection Man tie-in, so just have Martian Manhunter just randomly wake up Resurrection Man and be like, hey Mitch Shelley, it's your turn. You're the key to whatever's coming next. So the next tie-in we're talking about is Adventures of Superman, issue 1,000,000, written by Dan Abnett and Andy Lanning, with art by Will Rosado and Larry Malstead. So Superman arrives at the future Fortress of Solitude. This is the present-day Superman, Prime Superman, as you could call him. And then Resurrection Man shows up and is like, what are you doing in here? And Superman is like, I should probably ask you the same thing. And Resurrection Man is like, well, if what HeadNet has been saying about you is true, that you are an evil clone, I'm the last person you're going to want to meet. And so Superman and Resurrection Man, Mitch Shelley, start fighting each other. They have a massive blowout where Superman kind of discovers that Mitch Shelley in the future has the ability to change his abilities using a device on his arm. It goes a little bit deeper into it in the Resurrection Man tie-in that I'll be talking about after this. So, yeah, they have a massive fight. And then Resurrection Man manages to pacify Superman using a pacifying move. He's like, wow, that was a good pacifying move you did there. And that's when Mitch Shelley is like, it's because you taught it to me, Cal. He's like, I'm sorry I'm sorry I fought you like that and I was pretty rough. I had to do my job to see if you really were an evil clone or not. And I'm glad that you're not. So what we need to do is we need to figure out how to change the public's opinion of the Justice Legion. And in order to do that, I've got somebody that will be able to help us with that. And so Mitch Shelley summons the Teen Titans of the future, which consist of Troy, Arsenal, Aqualad, and Nightwing. I go a little bit deeper into them in I'll talk about them a little bit more in Resurrection Man tie-in because they appear in that too, and they have a little bit more of a purpose in that. You get to see a little bit more of their powers. Mitch Shelley also confirms to Superman that Vandal Savage is one of their main goals of defeating in the future. And as he summons the Teen Titans to the Fortress of Solitude, that's when everything goes to shit. Because, first of all, there's a member of the Teen Titans that I didn't mention until now for this very reason. Johto is also a member of the Titans in the future, but you don't actually get to see him because as he comes through the teleporter shuts off while he's in it, and so he dies. It's pretty messed up. And it turns out that Solaris has taken over the Fortress of Solitude, and he uses Arsenal's body, because Arsenal in the future is like a robot body. He uses Arsenal's body to create his own, form inside the Fortress of Solitude and take over the whole thing. And then he summons a bunch of, Lex bots to fight the Titans and Resurrection Man and Superman. So they all fight back against Solaris, and Superman decides, he comes up with a plan to stop Solaris because he's figured out that Solaris is communicating with the Fortress of Solitude, and that's how he's controlling it. So what he could do is make it impossible for Solaris to communicate with the Fortress. So he heads to the core of the Fortress of Solitude, and he orders it to change its language to Kryptonian. So, because Solaris can't understand Kryptonian, it can't communicate with the Fortress of Solitude anymore. And so it gets, shut out of the Fortress of Solitude, and so Solaris has to escape because it is considered an intruder, because it can't communicate. And so, yeah, they managed to get Solaris out of the Fortress of Solitude and out of Arsenal. Arsenal's in pieces, but Troy is just like, he'll be fine, he'll put himself back together. And then Mitch Shelley gives Superman a spare costume of the 853rd century Superman, because he says that it's a boom suit, so it will allow him to teleport to Jupiter. So he gives Superman the suit, and Superman heads off to Jupiter to meet with the rest of the Justice League, while Mitch Shelley tells Superman that he's going to go to Mars and he's going to face Vandal Savage. And we'll find out how that goes down in the next tie-in that we're reading, which is Resurrection Man, which is also written by Dan Abnett and Andy Lanning. So, yeah, let's get straight into Resurrection Man. This is a good one. Alright, so Resurrection Man 1,000,000. I'm excited to talk about this one because this is a really good tie-in. It might be one of my favorite ones so far. So in the far future, Mitch Shelley, well, first of all, he knows that the Justice League from the present are all meeting on Jupiter. So what he's going to do is he's going to head to Mars so that he can confront Vandal Savage, somebody who he has fought on many occasions. They are lifetime adversaries because they're both immortals, so it makes sense. And so he heads to Mars to meet with Vandal, and it's when he gets to Mars that he reveals that in the far future, Resurrection Man has a device on his arm. This is so cool. He has a device on his arm that, because if you didn't know, Resurrection Man, his whole power is that, like, if he dies, he comes back to life with a new power. Well, in the future, he has a device on his arm that injects him with lethal poison that kills him in a second so that he can come back with a new power. So what he can do is that he can just keep killing himself until he has the power that he wants, and then he just keeps going. It's pretty cool. It's a pretty cool evolution of his powers. So, Mitch Shelley notes that Vandal Savage has set up a massive dust wall that's really hard to get through, but he manages to use his powers to get through it, and he confronts Vandal Savage. And then Solaris appears as a hologram, telling Vandal that he wants the Night Shard, which is what they call the kryptonite that Starman had buried on Mars many years ago. And Vandal was like, I'm going to finish my conversation with Mitch Shelley, and then I'll come see you, Solaris. And he turns off the hologram, and then he has a conversation with Mitch Shelley, and he's like, I have Night Shard, this is what we need in order to kill Superman, because I never leave a job half-finished, and I love my work. And Mitch Shelley is like, well, I'm not going to let you win. You know, today's the day that one of us dies. And so Vandal Savage is like, well, you're not just going to be able to beat me in a fight when I've got this. And he puts on what he calls an Omicron knife suit, which is just a suit that covers his entire body, and it has giant knives on it that can, what he says, it can rip the soul out of Resurrection Man's body, making him unable to resurrect. That's what he said. We don't know if it can actually do that, but it's like Vandal Savage is paraphrasing it in that kind of way. Meanwhile, the future Teen Titans appear in this book as well. So we got Arsenal, we got Aqualad, we got Troy, and we've got Nightwing, the future versions of them. Obviously, they are not the same versions from the present. In this future, Arsenal is a living robotic thing with energy in it. Troy is like Wonder Woman made out of marble. Nightwing is like a bat-looking dude with a cape. And Aqualad is completely made out of water. Just like the Aquaman from this future. So they use Aqualad's powers to try and break through the dust wall that Vandal Savage has created, which has become an actual solid wall. And they manage to break their way through, which they then come in conflict with Vandal Savage's giant, like, tanks and vehicles with big spinning saws and stuff, and they start fighting them. And meanwhile, Vandal Savage and Mitch Shelley continue their fight, and it's at this point that Mitch Shelley recollects fighting Vandal Savage throughout time alongside, like, Superman in the far past, to fighting Vandal Savage in the far future as well, in Gladiator times and stuff, and he even mentions how Vandal Savage was responsible for the death of his daughter, which is what fueled their adversaries, but, like, their rivalry. But it's also mentioned that they've known each other for so long that sometimes they were enemies, sometimes they were friends and allies, but it would always end in them fighting each other. So one of them is destined to kill the other eventually. So Mitch Shelley uses these Tektites, because he has that power now, in order to rip apart Vandal Savage's suit. But then Vandal reveals that he's like, I hoped you would do that, because now I've used the Tektites to create my own kind of Tektites that I call the Nano Disassemblers. And because they have your DNA, they can pull your DNA apart at the atomic level. So the Nano Disassemblers are thrown at Resurrection Man, and they start pulling his atoms apart. And Vandal then reveals that the Titans are stuck in a time loop forever, and they never get freed from it, which is really sad. The last time you see the Titans in this, they're just stuck in a time loop forever, which basically means that they're dead. Like, they're gonna die. Or they're practically dead because they can't do anything. And then Vandal reveals that the Nano Disassemblers, like, so they're attacking Mitch Shelley's body, pulling him apart, and Vandal goes in for one last swing to kill him, and Mitch Shelley uses his teleporting abilities to teleport away, taking Vandal's arm with him. And he's like, I was able to get rid of the Nano Disassemblers by teleporting and your arm, and so now I'm going to kill you because, you know, I can just heal myself by changing my powers. And that's when Vandal reveals that he has an hourglass, and there was a little bit of sand in the hourglass that during their fight, he managed to get the piece of sand into Resurrection Man's body using his using the the Nano Disassemblers. So they carried a bit of sand into his body, and that bit of sand was actually a virus. And what the virus is doing is it's taken over Resurrection Man's device that allows him to kill himself, and it takes control of it, and now it's going to just repeatedly kill Resurrection Man forever. So Vandal Savage is like, I can't kill you outright, but I can make your device kill you forever, so that you're basically dead, because you just keep dying no matter what, and you can't get out of it. And so Vandal is like, alright, so you're gonna die forever, and I need to go find Solaris. Do I have the Night Fragment? Oh, where's my keys? And then, so he grabs his keys and he heads into the boom tube. And as he teleports away, we're left with Resurrection Man going like, Vandal! And he's left writhing in pain, just dying repeatedly forever. And that's where it ends. It ends with Resurrection Man dying repeatedly as the sands of Mars blow over him, and he senses his friend Martian Manhunter is keeping him company during his final moments, which are the fact that he's just going to be dying forever. So it's kind of a bittersweet ending to that. I mean, it is a bad ending, especially because the Titans just kind of got stuck in a time loop and died. And yeah, Resurrection Man is stuck dying forever. I don't know if this is going to lead into anything, like if it is kind of a hint that Martian Manhunter is going to somehow save Resurrection Man's life. Who knows? So Robin issue 1 million is the prime example of a filler issue. It's written by Chuck Dixon, with art by Staz Johnson and Stan Walk. And Robin, the Toy Wonder, because this is based in the future, isn't even really the main character of this book. This is a filler episode. Like, this is a filler issue, because this issue takes place it's after Catwoman. So, remember at the end of the Catwoman tie-in, Catwoman got away, and she left Batman and Robin the Toy Wonder with the boom tube suit. That's where we're taking off. So, Robin the Toy Wonder is fighting a bunch of the prisoners on the asylum planet that he and Batman are on. Meanwhile, Batman is trying to figure out how to get the boom suit out of the tube. Luckily for him, future Batman shows up. Or at least a hologram of him, because I guess he can send a hologram of himself to the future, even though he's currently in the present. I don't know, Chuck Dixon is just making up a bunch of shit to get this story done, where he's just like, oh yeah, like, future Batman can just show up in the future if he wants to with a hologram. To help Batman, because the plot requires it. The Laughter shows up, which is the future version of the Joker, and he fights Robin the Toy Wonder. And basically, he wants the boom tube suit that Batman is trying to get. He really badly hurts Robin the Toy Wonder using his electrical, like, joy buzzers on his hands. And then, Batman gets the boom tube suit out of its containment thing. Like, its containment tube. And that's when the Laughter shows up and is like, give me the boom tube suit or I will kill Robin the Toy Wonder. I will kill your little sidekick. And so Batman reluctantly gives him the suit, and Laughter puts on the suit and then throws Robin the Toy Wonder at Batman and then uses the suit to boom his way out. He's like, where should I go? What planet should I take control of? And he uses the suit to teleport himself away, and Batman tries to get him, but he's too late. But it doesn't matter, because the Laughter accidentally teleports himself into the middle of space, and he dies. He's just like, I'm free! Oops. And he's just floating in space, and he's just dead. So, Robin the Toy Wonder is barely hanging on, dying in his own comic. And, the futuristic Batwing, I guess you could call it, flies up, and Batman's like, alright, we'll get into the Batwing, we'll find a way out of here. And Robin the Toy Wonder is like, the Batwing can't survive in space, so we need some kind of spaceship. And luckily for them, there just happens to be a space shuttle in the asylum planet that is owned by some rat dude. He's like a leader of a bunch of rat people, or like a bunch of anthropomorphic rats, except he isn't a rat, he is a human with rat features. And he's trying to escape on his space shuttle, and Batman forces him to take him and Robin the Toy Wonder with them. So they all get onto the space shuttle, and they launch themselves into space. And as they get into space, Robin the Toy Wonder dies. That's right, Chuck Dixon killed off Robin the Toy Wonder in his own comic. I wasn't lying when I said, like, this tie-in is a Robin tie-in. It's Robin 1 million, and yet Robin doesn't feel like the main character of his own book. It's Batman who is the main character of this. And so after he has died, Batman orders this rat dude who doesn't have a name. I'd love to call him a name. I guess I'll call him Rat Boy. Rat Catcher 1 million. Orders him to take him to Jupiter so that he can meet with the rest of the Justice League at the Justice Legion headquarters. And that's the entire tie-in. I wish I could go a little bit deeper into it and really explain it, but there's not much to it. It's very surface level. Like I said, it's a filler issue. It's literally just Chuck Dixon coming up with a way to fill in, because he had to do this issue, I guess. Somebody had to do this, because this was a Batman title. They needed, Robin was a title. They needed to do a tie-in. And so it was kind of like, what are you supposed to do? I guess you just fill in the gap between Catwoman and then Batman going to Jupiter. I don't know. It's not great. Definitely one that you can just skip, because you don't need to read it. You can just guess that Batman gets to Jupiter somehow. You don't need to know how he gets there. You can just assume that at the end of Catwoman, he got the boom suit and he went to Jupiter. This issue is completely unnecessary. But enough of that, because that, unfortunately, is the final tie-in of this episode. I don't like the fact that we're ending on this one, but we have to end on this one because I've calculated these episodes out and I've got to save the rest of the tie-ins for next week, which is going to be our final episode. So we got more tie-ins, and then we'll have the final issue of DC 1 Million where we'll be finishing this event. I wish we could end on a higher note, but unfortunately the cards were dealt to us this way, finishing on Robin 1 Million. But one thing you have to look forward to next week is that we're starting off with Flash 1 Million, which is written by Mark Waid, so that's probably going to be good. You know, at least guarantees that it's going to be a fun story. But yeah, if you enjoyed this episode, I hope to see you next week for more DC 1 Million. I am enjoying this event, despite some of these tie-ins being lackluster. Like, the Robin one is the only one so far where I'm just like, I kind of wish I didn't read it, because I just didn't like it. But other than that, the other tie-ins have had some level of fun to them. I don't know, when I read a Robin tie-in to an event, I don't want it to be him dying. That's a bummer. Like, I don't want that to be the tie-in, or Robin dies. But yeah, that's going to be it for this week, and hope to see you next week for more DC 1 Million, where we finally finish it. So yeah, I'll see you then, and have a good one.